Hey everyone, welcome to Logan's Mosh Pit. Glad to have you here. Do me a favor and please subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Rock and Read. Today we'll read chapter 14 of It's So Easy and Other Lies by Duff McKagan. Chapter 14 is called Sold Out Shows. Here we go. We continued to expand our song list and started looking for headline gigs. By October of 1985, we added Paradise City and Rocket Queen to our set list and headlined a show out in Rosetta at a place called the Country Club. In November, we headlined a show at the Troubadour with a national touring band we had always liked, Kicks from Maryland, opening for us. By the end of the year, we had added My Michelle and Night Train to our regular live repertoire. An independent record label named Restless called us near the end of the year and asked us to come down to their office in Long Beach. There were some cool bands on Restless, and the label people were into our band. They were ahead of the curve. No other label had contacted us at that point. Izzy bought a book about the music industry in preparation for the meeting. I remember looking through it. I could understand the sections I read, but there was a lot of to master. When we went to their office, they offered us something called a pressing and distribution deal, plus something like $30,000 toward recording cost. It was a simple 2-page deal, and they explained the whole thing to us. Still, we thought, if they're going to offer that, someone else will too. We left their office without signing, but we were nervous. Had we just ourselves? I thought of Sly Stone. I knew you could blow it. Kim Fowley, the fabled manager, bull, artist, and generally shady figure behind the scenes, or lack thereof, depending on how you want to look at it, of the Runaways, came knocking at the end of 1985, too. By the time I moved to Hollywood, the Runaways had come and gone, and Joan Jett, the Runaways' guitarist and main songwriter, was a successful solo artist, but Kim Fowley was still trolling the gutters for the next rising stars. Once GNR was up and running and writing songs and we were attracting a regular and growing audience, Kim set his sights on us. He wanted to manage our band. One thing that we knew about ourselves by that point was the Guns was the best and most committed band that any of us had ever been in, and we had become very protective of it. Kim had a storied but checkered past. I had opened for Joan Jett when I was with the Fastbacks shortly before she became a household name with I Love Rock and Roll, and I knew the stories. We were dubious. When Kim sensed that we were not going to let him manage us, he came at us from a different angle. He invited us to breakfast at Denny's on Sunset. Slash, Axl, and I went. Kim said that he wanted to buy the publishing rights to our song, Welcome to the Jungle. He had a contract with him and a traveler's check for $10,000. To us, this was big money. But if Kim Fowley was offering this money to us now, if this one song was worth so much money to him, wouldn't that mean we had something valuable? Shouldn't we play this out a bit? I think in a weird way, we owed it to Kim that we eventually ended up keeping the publishing rights to our songs when we later signed our record deal. If Kim Fowley thought our music rights were worth something, then by God, they probably were. He could spot this stuff and we knew it. Kim intensified his efforts, coming to see us again a few weeks later to offer $50,000. But it didn't matter. By that time, we knew to hold on to anything that was ours. It was all we had and all we believed in. Like Joan Jett and the Runaways, we were chasing a dream, and the world was exciting and wild and fast. We avoided getting involved with people like Kim Fowley, not because he wasn't fascinating and smart, but because by 1985 we had heard lots of stories about bands that had been ripped off. Between what happened to the Runaways, they never really got the shot they deserved, and lost control of their name and songs, and the financial straits the members of Aerosmith faced in the early 1980s. Despite their enormous success in the 1970s, we were familiar with the full spectrum of rock and roll pitfalls. We could see the sharks beginning to circle us, and we were wary. On January 18, 1986, before our show at the Roxy, a friend ducked his head into the backstage area. "This gig is sold out." When we looked out at the crowd, we still saw the same faces. We knew most of the people in the audience even after we were selling out venues like this. Dell, West Arkeen, Mark Cantor, and assorted girlfriends assembled backstage as usual. The big difference? One of my nephews stood in front of the backstage area as security. There were no high fives, and yet I was proud of how far we had come. I played some big gigs with 10-minute warning, and G&R shows in early 1986 had that feeling. Except, this was LA, one of the biggest cities in the world. Still, the members of Guns never looked at one another and said, "Yeah, we rocked it." We celebrated that kind of stuff on stage. We would be better on stage than in rehearsal. We recognized that there were transcendent moments, but we didn't need to talk about them. You have this silent relationship as players in a band. It takes all these parts and you have moments, whether it's between a guitar player and a singer, a bassist and drummer, or everyone together. And when you saw that look in the audience, people just blown away, that feedback from the crowd was enough, especially since we were playing to a lot of the same people. We could see the looks on their faces and feel the electricity when we hit a new high. Around this time, a friend of Izzy's named Robert John became our official band photographer. Robert had shot pictures of another LA band, Wasp. His girlfriend, a dominatrix at some club in Hollywood, was the bondage girl in Wasp horror movie-style stage show. Nice girl. I liked her. Robert had come to one of our shows to hang out with Izzy and took a few shots of the band. They looked great, so we started having him shoot more and more for us. He also believed in the band from day one. "You guys are going to be huge," he always said. Yeah, just take the pictures. We gave him a lot of when we did photo shoots. Not only did we begin to sell out everywhere we played in early 1986, but the club owners suddenly loved us. The crowd we brought included punkers, rockers, and best of all, lots of women. And they all drank a lot. We broke the liquor sales records of the Troubadour. Once you start doing that kind of business, people notice. And also, once you start headlining, you don't have to sell tickets on your own anymore. There was no more paying to play. A&R staff from major labels started to pop up at gigs too. On Friday, February 28th, we had the coveted headline slot at the Troubadour again, and at least a dozen record execs were rumored to be in the audience. Creepy manager types were oozing around, trying to get backstage to charm us. Having my nephew there came in handy that night. Los Angeles was also a beacon for national and international touring acts, and now that we could fill clubs, we started to get offers to open shows for big artists. When my boyhood rock idol Johnny Thunders came to town in late March of 1986, the promoters asked us to open both his shows. For me, this was a huge deal. Probably for Izzy too. I had seen Johnny play a bunch of shows on the West Coast in the early 1980s, and had even gotten a chance to jam with him after a show in Portland. Of course, by 1986, I didn't hold Thunders in quite as high regard as I once had. The romantic notion of a junked-up like Johnny had faded a bit for me with direct experience of heroin. I could even admit in hindsight that the chance to jam with him probably happened only because he had shot up a post-show speedball and was looking for anything to do, even if that meant jamming with some teenage straggler. But still, sharing a bill with Johnny Thunders? I was really looking forward to that first show at Fender's Ballroom. Unfortunately, one of the first things that happened when we got down to Fender's for the show was that Johnny started to chat up Axl's girlfriend Erin while we were on stage doing our sound check. Johnny also wanted to know where he could score some dope. Axl flipped out when he got wind that Johnny had hit on Erin and began a tirade backstage. Axl can be intimidating when he started yelling and carrying on. Johnny spent the rest of that night hiding in his dressing room, jonesing for a fit. Whatever remnants of a romantic and swashbuckling image I had of Johnny Thunders disappeared that night. During the weeks between that Troubadour show and the Thunders gig, the record label frenzy to sign us peaked. We were having fun doing what we were doing, playing live all the time, courted by all the clubs, near hysteria at our shows, blowing the door off places. We were in no rush to shift gears for the sake of a record deal. We knew we were good, and we had songs we liked. I was convinced we were too hard and too dirty ever to be huge, yet everyone was in the hunt, or at least pretending to be, as industry people started falling over one another to talk to us. Robert John had been haranguing us to approve some photos he had taken so that he could start to submit them to magazines as the coverage began to spike. Slash and I finally agreed. One afternoon, the two of us went with Robert to some girl's apartment right on Hollywood Boulevard to look at his proofs. Robert explained that we'd have to look at the contact sheets through a little magnifying glass shaped like a shot glass called a loupe. When we arrived at the girl's apartment, we were relieved that she had air conditioning, as it was in the high 90s that day, and we had walked there from the Gardner Alley. Philippe, the bus-driving drug dealer we knew from Gardner, came out of the back bedroom as we arrived. It was obvious that both he and the girl whose apartment this was were flying on crack. No big deal. We were used to this. Slash and I were not exactly looking forward to going through this stack of proofs for Roberts. It wasn't a very rock and roll thing to do, but we grudgingly acknowledged that it was part of the deal for a working band. Now, we saw that there were hundreds of individual shots that we had to approve or deny. Right at that moment, Philippe offered me some crack. Crack cocaine was one of those drugs I had always passed on when it was around. But between Seattle and then Hollywood, I saw a lot of people get addicted to the stuff, and crack addiction wasn't a pretty sight. But on this day, I decided to try it. I'm not sure why. I had been drinking. Maybe I needed something to get me over the edge so I could look at this heap of photos. My first experience with most drugs were the result of something as dumb as that. In the 6th grade, I dropped acid for the first time because an older kid, one I looked up to, offered it to me on the way home from school. I didn't want to embarrass myself, so I did it. The crackling sound from the torch rock in its receptacle and the side of the glass tube filling up with smoke that smelled both sweet and acidic was mesmerizing. I inhaled. The high I experienced from that first hit of crack was one of the most euphoric 60 seconds I had ever felt. My senses sharpened, and I felt stronger than Atlas. I found myself horny. I was filled with a powerful feeling that I could accomplish anything. The resultant crash was just as extreme. It seized my whole body in an acute and all-encompassing craving. "Hey, Philippe, set me up again, okay?" He gave me a sizable rock, and I dove head first into another hit. I thought, this is good. Crack accentuated everything in a good way. The features of the girl's drab cookie-cutter apartment suddenly became beautiful. The formica-topped island that separated the kitchen from the living room suddenly took on architectural perfection. A use of space so logical and brilliant, its beauty blew me away. What at first glance looked like an ugly orange shag carpet was now as magnificent as a priceless Persian masterpiece in the window of an expensive Beverly Hills rug shop. The traffic I could hear outside on Hollywood Boulevard transformed from a noisy nuisance to a source of enchantment. I wondered where these people might be headed. Maybe some of them were on crack too, and as happy and elated as I was. I had started to come down again, but had another rock at the ready. No worries. Slash was doing the same thing as me, and now we fought over the loop to start the process of approving individual shots among the stacks of photo sheets. We raced through the images, somehow doing it in tandem so that neither of us would have to wait around with nothing to do. God forbid. But alas, our rock started to dwindle and finally disappear. Philippe now wanted money if we chose to continue. Oh, I didn't have any money. I bolted from the apartment. The impossibly hot sun singed my whole being as a ridiculous crash almost doubled me over with despair. All my muscles seemed to contract at once. I felt dark and used and stupid. The 10-block walk back to our Gardner storage space was one of the hardest physical challenges I had ever endured. Sluggish, jonesing, lonely, depressed. Ugh. For some reason, I stopped at a payphone and did something really stupid. I called my mom. I tried to act cool and just see how she was doing, see what was going on with the family in Seattle. The truth was, I wanted to hear the voice that always made me feel better as a small boy when I was sick with the flu, or when jocks beat me up for being a punk rock. I knew she could tell something was wrong with me. The stench from the ghetto phone booth was making me dry heave, and it was impossible to see out of it because of graffiti that blackened the glass. Claustrophobia washed over me. I couldn't breathe. I tried to keep my cool on the phone. "No, Mom, I'm okay. Just a little tired," I said. "I might be coming down with something." Yeah, I was coming down from the crack. After I hung up the phone, I trudged the last few blocks to the rehearsal place. Normally I would be happy to see any of my bandmates or the few friends we had. This time I was hoping to find something, anything, that could help me take the edge off the plummeting feeling I was going through. Pills, night train, maybe even some coke, or all those things together. When I rounded the corner into our alleyway, the sun hit me dead straight in the eyes. I let out an audible groan of shock and pain. The door to our space was open a little bit, and luckily JoJo and Dell were there with some night train. After gulping down an entire bottle by myself, I told those guys what I had been up to. "Dude," said JoJo when I had finished, "I have a little bit of money on me. I'll go get some more booze." He took off down to the corner liquor store. That was the thing about our inner circle. We would do anything we could for one another. We did not judge one another. We just had one another's backs. I settled down a little bit after that first bottle. Being in our little rehearsal space helped too. It was a safe haven. The dingy floor with the old brown carpet was filthy, but it was our filth. The amps that lined the wall were warm, but they were the only sure bet we had to be heard musically. These amps were our sound. The loft was only 6 feet high, so anything up there, whether it was a guitar case or a girl, was easily accessible. This was our refuge, and our friends were there for me too. JoJo came back with a big paper grocery bag of alcoholic fortifications, and my crack cocaine crash faded into the past. Just another experience to tally up. I would end up doing crack many more times, but I was never as ill prepared as I was the first time with Philippe. Well, that's the end of Chapter 14. Let me know what you thought of Chapter 14 in the comments below. That does it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. I really appreciate the support. I'll see you next time. Till then, rock on.